So supply chain is actually, I can say, is one of the most important topics in managing a business, especially if you're producing and you want to sell your product and deliver your product to your customers. This part of topic is very important because you are actually managing and integrating the whole process from raw material, transporting the raw material to other steps for processing, and after that, moving them for production, assembly, and then transporting them to stores and delivering and selling them to your customers. All right. So this whole process is called supply chain, and managing it is very important. Of course, a big portion of costs involved in producing and selling a product is uh, included in supply chain. Normally, more than 50% of the cost is the cost of supply chain. So it's very important because if you can reduce the cost of supply chain, you actually have control over more than 50% of your cost of production. And if you have good control and you can minimize that cost, you're actually making opportunity for yourself to reduce the cost. um, and reducing the cost, keeping the same price, that means you can make more profit. So the global company profile is being discussed in the book that you will read it is Darden Restaurant. So it's about a restaurant where they get all the raw material from, process the food and sell it to customers. The supply chain strategy important. Sourcing issues, 6 sourcing strategies. We will not go through all of these. We'll just touch important parts. So supply chain risk, managing the integrated supply chain, building supply base, logistic management, distribution management. These are all parts of supply chain management. So ethics and sustainable supply chain management, measuring supply chain performance. Again, feel free to unmute yourself and ask question or type in the text in the chat box. So the objective of supply chain management is to structure the supply chain to maximize its competitive advantage and benefits to ultimate consumer. So again, want to make sure we keep quality of service, not only quality of the product, quality of service, which is making sure customers have access to product, making sure there is a fast process of delivering product to stores and then to the customer, making sure that the price is not that high, and at the same time you have a quality. So all these are important in supply chain management. So this is an example of supply chain for beer. And of course, there are different raw material being combined, including grains from farm, and then processing them. And then we need can manufacturing. And we, of course, we might need bottle manufacturing as well. So they have their own raw material coming up from other resources, other suppliers. And the suppliers, they start creating or making those raw material, delivering them to the processing. That's the second stage, to process them. And then they go to the brewer will combine these, make the beer and put the beer into cans or bottles. And then from there, the next step is transporting them to distributors wholesalers, grocery stores, and at the end, your customer will buy that product. So all these steps from raw material, from farm, down to the end, to deliver it to the customer, this whole process is called supply chain. And you can see how many people, how many variables, factors are involved when you have this big amount of work and process in your business. So supply chain management is very important. And if you, we have this major at CBA, business department. And if you want to continue to get your minor, at least in supply chain, you can do that. So for more information, you can ask our admin people. If you had questions, just let me know. I will direct you to the right person. I send you to the right person. So the coordination of all supply chain activities, starting with raw material and ending with the satisfied customer. So the satisfied customer is very important, because if your customer is not satisfied, they will not buy your product, they will not promote your product, they will not refer the product to friends, to family, and you will start losing customers. You lose customers and you can't sell your product. Whatever you do, you don't make enough profit to survive, so you will have to stop your business. Includes suppliers, manufacturers, service providers, distributors, wholesalers, retailers, and final customers. All of these, there are other factors, but these are the major ones. From the view of strategic, it's very important. So large portion of sales dollars spent on purchases. Supplier relationship increasingly integrated and long-term, improve innovation, speed, design, reduce cost. Managing supplier relationship has added emphasis. So this is just an example of supply chain cost as a percentage of sale for different types of products. So in auto industry, you can see about 67% of the purchase price is the cost of the purchase price is from the supply chain. For beverages, 52%. For chemicals, 62%. For food, 60%. Lumber, 61%. Metals, 65%. Paper, 55%. So you can see, at least if we exclude restaurants, if you exclude restaurants, other than restaurants, more than 50% of other products or other services being provided, more than 50% of its cost is from supply chain. So if you can have a good control over the supply chain cost and can minimize it, you can make a lot of significant effect on your profit. The supply chain versus sales strategy. You can read this part. It's not something important here. So in this part, how corporate strategy impacts supply chain decisions. So you can see these are different strategies you can have: low cost strategy, response strategy, and differentiation strategy. So let's see. Primary supplier selection criteria. Cost. Your low cost strategy can be searching and finding suppliers that give you a low cost material or raw material. Response strategy, making sure you have the higher capacity, higher speed, and higher flexibility. From differentiation strategy, product development skills, willing to share information jointly and rapidly develop products. So same, you can go through all of these and get more information. So supply chain inventory. So you have learned this part in the past, right? You can minimize inventory to hold down the cost. Use buffer stock to ensure speedy supplies. That's from response strategy. And differentiation strategy, you can minimize inventory to avoid product um, costs. So distribution network, inexpensive transportation, sell-through discount. These are different ways you can do it from cost strategy. And for, because this is transportation involved, right? So fast transportation is important for us, but of course, the faster the transportation, the higher the cost. So there has to be a balance there to keep your customers happy, and at the same time, making sure your cost is not too high. Provide premium customer service, and the last is differentiation. So gather and communicate market research data, knowledgeable sales staff. So all these are explained perfectly in the book. You can see this table from the book and read on and on. Again, feel free to just ask questions, okay? Make or buy decisions. So choosing between obtaining products and serving services externally as opposed to producing them internally. So that's one resourcing issue. So the actual issue is sometimes having a supplier doing the job for you. Suppliers, they know that they have value and they will increase their price. So one of the things you can do is do the production, do the initial process yourself. So you will invest. If you have that budget, you can invest and you can reduce the cost of one of your suppliers or two of your suppliers by producing or completing that process yourself. Outsourcing, transfer traditional internal activities and resources to outside vendors. Efficiency and specialization. You have learned this in economics. Focus on core competencies. And six sourcing strategies. So having many suppliers. That's what I personally am a fan of it. Few suppliers strategy, vertical integration, joint ventures. So the last two, we won't talk about it, but virtual companies, of course, that reduces a lot of costs when we go virtual. So why do we need to have many suppliers? Why not working with one supplier? And as I can say as a big picture, that reduces your risks. You have lower risk of failure because when you have one supplier, that if that one supplier fails to deliver what they were supposed to deliver, then your whole process will stop. Your whole supply chain will stop because you are only dependent on one supplier. But if you chose multiple suppliers, if any failures happen, if any low quality or any attempts of one supplier to trying to increase the price or increase or reduce the quality, then you can leave that supplier and continue with the other supplier. So that's a good strategy to have. Having alternatives is always a good strategy in business. There are benefits for having few suppliers. Of course, we're not going to have 20 suppliers. Why not 20 suppliers? Because there's a cost in managing each supplier. So you don't want to have that cost to be multiplied by 20, but multiplied by 2, 3, or 4, or 5 suppliers. That's normally okay. Not more than that, it's suggested. So buyer forms longer term relationship with fewer suppliers. That's true. You have a better relationship, but um, you always need to keep in mind that this is business. So create value through economics of scale and learning curve improvement. Suppliers more willing to participate in JIT programs, and cost of changing suppliers is huge. Of course, this is if you have very few suppliers, then you will have to change. But if you, at the beginning, you start with multiple suppliers, there's no change. You just eliminate the ones that is not contributing to your business. Trade secrets and other alliances may be at risk. So read these, vertical integration. So when it comes to integration, one more time, the software that I recommend you to learn is SAP. So learn SAP. That's a software for supply chain management, SCM integration. So I sent to your chat. So SAP is a software for supply chain integration. Everything in your supply chain will be integrated with SAP. So let's move on to, so you will read all these from the book. That's your reading assignment. Supply chain risk. So what is risk? Risk is the probability of failure. For supply chain management, risk is the probability that you fail somewhere in your supply chain process. One of these processes fails, and of course, if that happens, there might be a possibility or a probability that your whole supply chain fails. As a result, it's always good to make sure you have plans to reduce this risk, right? So this risk is something that we can calculate it based on historical data. If you started a business, you can use historical data from other businesses, and that can help you to set up your supply chain. And so we will talk about this risk. I will teach you one formula for that risk. And there are actually many formulas. There are many models, statistical and mathematical models that can calculate this risk. And knowing the amount of risk in supply chain is very important, because that can help you to change the way your network is working to deliver product to the customer. And as a result, you can make changes to it. By making change to it, you can reduce the risk. And when your risk calculated is reduced enough, you will know that this system is a stable system. So we're looking for a stable supply chain system. We're looking for a stable supply chain system. Why? The reason is, what do we mean by stable? What we mean is, if there is a small change, if there is a failure in one of your parts of your process, then the whole system does not fall apart. Okay, the whole system keeps working, and you can always handle and manage to keep the production being sent to the customer. So some strategies: more reliance on supply chains means more risk. Fewer suppliers increase dependence, of course, compounded by globalization and logistic complexity, vendors' reliability and quality risks, and political and currency risks are also factors available. Risk and mitigation tactics. So research and assess possible risks. So research is very important. And so this is more about historical data. and doing research about your investigating and learning from your suppliers, their background, how they have been doing in the past with other customers. Innovative planning, reduce potential disruptions. So that requires a lot of planning and research. Prepare responses for negative events, flexible, secure supply chains, diversify supplier base. So that's, again, having alternative suppliers is very important for us. Right, so the next parts, can see that we have the risk right here, the name of the risk. So these are possible risks. Name of the risk and risk reduction tactics. What can we do to solve the problem? And one example is right next to it. So all these are available in the book. You will read all these, but which one is more important and have a possibility to be on your exam? I put them in red color. Those in red color are the ones that they have higher chance to be on your exam. So I'm actually telling you which part is more important, and I will ask on exam. So those are important, okay? All right, so read all this from the book, and we don't have much thing here. So that was a good start on chapter 11. The rest is more like reading. There is a numerical part that I won't ask from it. So let's move on to 11S, which is the part that I will give you question from for exam, final exam. Okay. Do you have any questions up to this point? Anyone has any question up to this point? Let me know, please, on the chat, or feel free to unmute yourself. All right, since there's no questions, so let's move on to 11S, supply chain management analytics. So the topic I decided to talk about here will be one of the topics in risk management, to calculate the risk of supply chain. And there are many topics. Normally each professor use or chose a different topic. So I decided to go for the risk calculation, because I want you to have that that's an added value to your resume. So you can separately add that you know supply chain management, and addition to that, you can write in your resume separately that you know risk calculation for supply chain. So that's an important thing. So techniques for evaluating supply chain, evaluating disaster risk in supply chain, managing bullwhip effect. These three are the topics we'll talk about. So evaluating disaster risk. So many forms of potential disruptions are available. For a given supply cycle, the probability of end suppliers being disrupted is, so this formula is very important. Make sure write it down. Make sure you just write this down. And I'm going to go through and explain this formula for you. In addition to that, we will have one example, and we'll go through that example together. Okay, the formula is Pn. So P is the probability or the risk when you have n suppliers. The question is how many suppliers, with the information that you have gathered with your research, how we can calculate the probability or probability of failure or the risk of having that amount of suppliers. So probability of n is S. So what is S? S is the probability of a super event that would disrupt all suppliers simultaneously. So at exactly the same time, all of your suppliers are going to be disrupted, or they are failing to deliver your raw material or your processed material. So that probability, of course, we expect to have a very low number. That probability is S. So S, that's right here in the formula, and right here in the formula is the probability of a super event, something very bad happens, and all of your suppliers fail to deliver. All right, so if S is such probability, 1 minus S is the opposite of it, right? The opposite. The probability that not all suppliers simultaneously are disrupted. So it could be many of them, but not all of them at the same time. It could be none of them. So all of those are considered. Multiplied by U. So what is U? U is the probability of only one supplier is disrupted. Only one. So U is only one supplier. And since you have n suppliers, the probability of each of those being disrupted is multiplied by probability of 1 and 1 and 1 and 1 failure. So that's U times U times U n times, which is U to power n or exponent n. Okay. Then L is the financial loss incurred in a supply cycle if all suppliers were disrupted. So if all of your suppliers fail to deliver, what would happen? How much loss do you have? Of course, you can't sell, you can't make profit, you can't make revenue. So that loss should be a big number, okay? And what is C? C is the marginal cost of managing one supplier. So how much do you spend to manage one supplier? That's actually kind of a limit you have on increasing the number of your suppliers, because if you have too many suppliers, you will have a high cost managing them. So you can probably go up to 3 or 4 or 5, not more than that. Any question on the formula? Are you all good with the formula? Any questions? Make sure you write down the formula for the next slide that we're going to have an example. So how many suppliers is reasonable, and what's the cost of each one? So portfolio of suppliers to balance. So you need the portfolio of suppliers to balance cost and risk. Evaluate 1, 2, 3 suppliers using a decision tree. So that's what we're going to do. So this example is available in the book. So what I expect you to do is to read the question. Make sure you understand how the question is written. And I'm going to go through the process of calculation. So S, which is probability of all suppliers fail, is 5 thousandths, 5.5 right? Or percent. Percent is out of 100, so that's 5 thousandths. 5 thousandths plus 1 minus 5 thousandths, that's the formula, right? S plus 1 minus S. And then U. U is probability of one supplier fails. And in this case, we are calculating probability of failure or risk of having only one supplier. So you have one supplier, U to power 1. So that U is given to us, 4%. 4% means 0.04, right, to power 1. So that's this number, and then calculate it. That would be 0.0448. All right. So what's the probability of failure of two suppliers? Two suppliers. The risk is same formula. Right? Up to this point is same formula. Same formula. The only thing is changing. You have two suppliers, so there is risk of each one fails is with the power 2, so times itself. And you can see that it has increased. So that number 0.04 now is 0.006. It has reduced. Has reduced from here to here. So lower risk when you have more suppliers. When you have 3 suppliers, then you have again another decrease, and you have 0.005, 5 thousandths risk. Make sure you understand, you can do the calculations here. I'll give you a minute to check these numbers. So if you have a question, feel free to ask. I'll give you 1 minute. Then 1 minute to check numbers and ask question if you have. All right. If there's no questions, I go to the next part. So in this part, we're going to graph a network or a tree for the suppliers. So how many suppliers is the best for us? All right. So we have 3 options. You might use 1 supplier, that's this part, 1 supplier, and 2 suppliers, and 3 suppliers. So if you have 1 supplier, you're calculating that that 1 supplier has failure or it does not have failure. So whether it has a failure or it does not have failure. So what's the probability of having a failure with that 1 supplier? We already calculated that number right here, and that's 0.0448. You can see that 0.0448 right there. Same number. So what's the probability of no failure? That's 1 minus, that's the opposite of this. The opposite of this is 1 minus 1 failure, which is 95.5% approximately. So what's the cost associated to our supply chain, our business, if there is a failure? If there is a failure, so you can see up here, the question is saying up here, in the previous slide, the question says the cost, C is the cost for 1. C is the cost for 1 supplier being managed. So what's the cost to it if we want to manage one supplier? That's $10,000. What's the cost, or what's the loss amount? What's the loss amount or the cost if all suppliers are disrupted at the same time? $10 million. So going back down here, if you decide to have one supplier and that supplier fails with 4% probability, what's going to happen? You're going to have a cost of $10 million loss. And of course, 10,000 is added because you're managing one supplier. So together, 10 million, $10,000 of loss is available for us. Okay, so here, same process of calculation. If you have two suppliers, what's going to happen is this is the probability of failure, 0.0065, and then you have probability of less than one fail. This is for both fail, right? If not both, the opposite of both fail is one of them fail or none of them fail. One of them fail or none of them fail. The probability is 1 minus P2, which is 1 minus this number, which is 99.3%. 99.3%. So what's the cost of managing two suppliers? Each supplier being managed cost us $10,000. And of course, that's $20,000. And together, if both of suppliers, we are deciding to have two suppliers, if both of them fail, what's going to happen is you will have a loss of $10,020,000. Where's the 20,000 come from? 2 times 10,000. That's the 2 times C. And the last one, you can calculate it yourself. So you can see how these calculations are being done. The next step is calculating the numbers, the box next to it, right here, for 458,000. So where did that number come from? That number came from right here. So you can see the probability of all suppliers fail is 0.0448. The cost associated, the loss associated to it is $10 million. So in fact, you multiply the 10 million by that probability of failure, you will have 448. 440, that's a 448, right? $448,000. So add the $10,000 cost of managing that supplier, that becomes 458. You can do the same calculation for the rest. And this is the total cost to having all suppliers fail. So checking those numbers is telling us which one is a better option because it has lower cost to us. So of course, one supplier is very costly, it's $458,000. Two suppliers, $85,000. If you have three suppliers and all of your suppliers fail, you have a reduction in cost, and that's $80,000. So you would most probably chose to go for three suppliers. Do you have any questions? Are we good with numbers? Please, everyone, let me know. I need to make sure you are good. So I go to the next step. Is everyone there? Just say yes or no. Are you good with the numbers? Kevin, Jed, Arturo, Anita, Sean, Eric. Perfect. So you're all good with the numbers, right? This question will be on final exam, so make sure you learn it, you understand it. All right. And of course, I will upload the record for you, so you have access to it in the future too. All right, so let's go to the next step. Any question? So the next topic is Bullwhip effect. Bullwhip effect. Let's see what Bullwhip effect is. So the tendency for larger order size fluctuations as orders are related to the supply chain creates unstable production schedules, expensive capacity change costs, longer lead time, and obsolescence. Damage can be minimized with supplier coordination and planning. All right, so what is Bullwhip effect? So this is a good graph to learn Bullwhip effect. So we have different resources here. One is the consumer. You can see on the right hand side, right here, you have consumer, retailer, wholesale, and supplier. So consumer is buying our product, and how many they are buying normally. For example, here normally they're buying 10 units. This can be 10,000 or 10 million units. Okay, so customers are buying normally they're buying 10 units. Doesn't matter. Uh, the quantity is in millions or thousand or what. So if suddenly there is an increase in demand, so this is your demand, right? The yellow color is your demand. If suddenly there is a small increase, maybe here it's like, to me, it looks like 50% increase in demand. So if there is 50% increase in demand, then your retailers, they are afraid, they are scared. They feel insecure. So what they do, they will order and request to have more supplies from the supplier, from the wholesaler, right? So as a result, they try to cover a higher level, and that increases the next level for wholesalers. So wholesalers see an increase in demand of retailers. So they think, okay, I want to be secure. I want to make sure this is not going to happen to me to have loss in the future and unsatisfied customers. So they will double their order or triple their order, right? And at the end, the supplier will decide to increase um, almost double, 2.5 times of what the wholesaler has requested or demanded. So you can see that for one small change in demand of the next parts in the supply chain is increasing. That's why we call it the Bullwhip effect. All right. So how can we reduce the effect of this Bullwhip effect? One very valuable way is integrating the systems. By integrating the systems, so again, SAP software is a very good way of making sure that you don't have Bullwhip effect. This normally happens because of miscommunications, because of lack of information or delay in the information. If at the same time all of these decision makers have access to exactly the same amount of information, normally this will reduce. So our job is to make sure there is low effect on of Bullwhip, right? We want to reduce that. To reduce that, you need to have a more stable, higher stability in your supply chain. Higher stability means if there is a small change in the system, in demand or in supply, then the rest of the parts of the network is not changing that much. So that's what we are looking for. And of course, these are, you can read the book on this topic. What are the causes of bullwhip effect and what can we do about it? Read that part. So this is important. There will be one question or two questions on this. Chapter S11S, and this is slide number 10. So this is important. Read that. You will have a question on it. And the book explains one example here for Walmart. You know how many branches they have in the US? They have many branches in the US, and they have many customers. So the way they are very much connected in the supply chain, and they have different levels of inventory. They don't have one inventory. They have multiple inventory in each state, and close to each large city, they have multiple suppliers. So if something goes wrong, they can immediately make sure that products are available. So they have lower risk of bullwhip effect. So the bullwhip effect measure, one of the measures actually that we have it in this book is calculated by the variance. And you know what variance is? Variance is a square of standard deviation, and it's actually showing variation, changes in order divided by changes in demand. And there are different ways to calculate this. So the factor you learn here is using variance of orders. Normally, the variance of orders and variance of demand are given to you. All you have to do is to divide them and check that number. If the variation in orders is more than variation in demand, you will have bullwhip effect, negative bullwhip effect. So if it's more than one, that means the numerator is larger. It means orders are being more than demand. So then you have variance amplification present. So you will have a question like this on exam. You will have a question that gives you the variance of orders and variance of demand and asks you which of the following is present: variance amplification, no amplification, smoothing. So if the number is more than one, that means by some changes in demand are causing more changes in orders, and that's not good. So they are supposed to change almost the same, not too much, okay? Any questions? Any questions, any topics, any comments? We're almost there to finish this topic. So um, another way the question can come out is we give you the data, and if the data is given to you, you can calculate the variance and the average, and using the variances, you can just divide the variances and calculate the bullwhip effect, okay? So this example is available in the book, and that's an example with some numbers given to you. You calculate the variance and just divide the variances and then find the bullwhip effect. So these are orders, these are demands. You find the variance using Microsoft Excel, or if you have a calculator, you can simply find. These are the formulas being used. Just decide that which of the following is present. Do you have amplification? So in this case, it's 1.5. It's more than one. There's amplification. All right. So that's it for today. So we're done with chapter 11 and 11S. We're done with chapter 11, 11S. You're good to read the book and do the homeworks. Once again, I extended the homework due dates for you to May 8th. And after that, your final exam will open to take, okay? All right, so if you have questions,